Asia at a crossroads. What are the biggest issues today?
I think people are looking at headlines. We try to look not at the headline, but what are the issues behind it. So a big issue is what is the quality and length of life? So the movement of fast food to Asia from the United States has brought diabetes, obesity, etc. And so the potential here to solve these problems by changing the food chain. The ability to deal with environmental change. And how do we deal with that issue? By moving to plant-based food and not having to grow animals for protein. And so all these issues are intertwined. And I think one of the things we try to show is where does finance begin and where does business begin and where does society begin, environment, health, etc. And the goal here that we bring is we bring all of our centers and all these people from different walks of life together to search for solutions.
To your point then, where are the investment opportunities then? I mean, what themes are there for investors?
Well, yesterday we spent our time on really food technology. The basic concept is healthy human, healthy planet. They are intertwined. So we can improve dramatically the health of a human being by moving to a plant-based diet. And today, as you know, you can find food substitutes in almost every area. And the same thing for that, we don't need to cut down rainforest, we don't need to graze, and we can substantially reduce methane going into the air from that standpoint. Technology, access to technologies that also improve the environment. The leadership in ESG here in Asia starts with our co-chairman of our Global Capital Markets Group, Hiro, from the Japanese Pension Fund. And as this is expanded, today with technology, hydroelectric power, solar power, wind power is now cheaper than coal. So it isn't even an environmental discussion. Coal is not economically viable, and in 2/3 of the world today, you can see a dramatic drop in closing of coal plants because you cannot operate them economically viable.
You talk about ESG. One, are you personally invested in ESG? Two, when do you see a tipping point in Asia?
I think we've seen the tipping point in Asia. If you go to China today and realize that there were no real cases of diabetes, and now they have the most people with diabetes in the world. Cancer, we know inflammation is associated with 62% of cancers. Well, half of the cigarettes in the world are almost sold in China. Last year, 2.5 trillion cigarettes, 300 million smokers. So changing in your microbiomes are dramatically changing the health of people in China. So this is not a Chinese issue. This is not a U.S. issue. This is not a Nigerian issue. This is an issue throughout the world today. And so we are looking at these industries and the potential. So you can take a look at it in just two companies if you're an investor. Since the last 2 years or so, Kraft Heinz stock has gone down 65 to 70%. Nestle stock has gone up 45%. You could say they're the same industry, both consumer products, two of the largest companies in the world. But Nestle focused on becoming a health company, sold their chocolate business in the United States, and has moved in that area much more aggressively than Kraft Heinz is.
Mike, you're well respected in the financial markets. We have to get your views on this low rate environment. What do you make of it, and how do you best invest in such an environment?
Well, the first challenge is negative interest rates for 15 or 20 trillion in Japan, Germany, and Denmark. If you take a mortgage, they'll pay you to take out a mortgage. What does this mean? There's many factors going on in the world. One is the entering into the financial system of tens of trillions of assets that were never part of that system. If you grew up in South Asia, for generations, the wealth was saved in gold, silver, precious stones, colored jewels, and so on. You're now coming into the system, entering more than 1 billion Indians and registering them by their retina. They're now in the financial system. And as assets that you could never borrow again, never leverage, or didn't send on a balance sheet come into the system, these tens of trillions. Second, in Asia, the creation of wealth was so significant, the world really didn't focus on that wealth. As that wealth becomes deposited in financial institutions, third, private equity, the growth of private equity. And today, there's more companies controlled by private equity, say in the United States, than are public. What that does is it changes the balance sheet and puts trillions of dollars back in to be reinvested. And so there is a challenge. As a pension fund, how do you meet those needs? And you cannot meet the needs, obviously, by buying debt today.
When you run out of safe bonds with decent returns, what do you do?
You are forced to invest in industries of the future, such as food tech, dealing with the change in the demographics that you spoke about. The fastest growing group in the world is over 100, then 90, 80. There's substantial reduction in children in the world today, and the U.S. had the lowest birth rate ever recorded last year in the history of the United States. So you have to look forward and not invest in the past. And one of the keys in investing was always regression analysis, which assumed that the future was going to be like the past. It is not. And so, but you are being driven away from investing in fixed income securities and looking for yield. And sometimes today, the greatest risk is buying these low yield securities that appear to be of good quality. In 1981, U.S. government bonds, some of them traded for 50 cents on the dollar. Not because of quality or whether they're going to pay, but because of the movement of interest rates.